Dogman in the treetops. Welcome to Scary Stories. When we discuss Bigfoot, people point to various items which might have actually been proof of their existence. The blood sample that Dr. Jeff Meldrum found at Snell Grove Lake, for instance. Casts of footprints and butt prints allegedly made by the Sasquatch in soft, wet earth. But when we talk about Dogman, there's more discussion of reasons why there is no evidence than conversations about DNA or hair samples. Some people say it's because dogmen live underground in hidden cavern systems. Others say the creatures can sense the presence of cameras or electrical equipment and just know to stay away from anywhere a researcher might be looking for evidence in. Well, in this episode, we've gathered some short dogman sightings and experiences sent to us that I think might mean more together than they mean separately. Besides shining a light on an aspect of dogman behavior that isn't often discussed or even noticed, these particular narratives might also help explain why DNA evidence of the species, or collection of species, is so rare. Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. Maybe we should turn our gaze upward instead of downward if we truly want to find real answers to the enigmas surrounding the dogman. So get ready, because here come some dogman stories sent to us by people who did just that. They looked up into the trees, and what they saw might frighten you. Story number 1. Close call at Catherine Walter Wilderness Area. I was hiking alone in Catherine Walter Wilderness Area in northern Wisconsin on a warm, overcast summer day. It would turn out to be the strangest day of my life, and I would learn more about cryptids in that hour than I had ever known before. I'm speaking, of course, about one cryptid in particular, and that is the bizarre canine-headed Midwestern gentleman that people refer to as the Dogman, or sometimes as a real Midwestern werewolf. In fact, I learned something about the Wisconsin werewolf on that day, which I'm not sure anyone ever even knew before. The sky was overcast and dark, but it was still a beautiful day to be out in nature. I stepped onto the secluded nature hiking trail in the Catherine Walter Wilderness Area, my boots crunching on the soft, damp earth. The sky was overcast, but the air was warm and humid. I could already feel the first drops of rain on my skin. For me personally, it's those private moments of intense peace in nature that I think life is meant for. Those are the times I think of when I'm upset. Those are the moments of sanity in a life that can sometimes feel completely crazy. So as this all started, I was not feeling scared, not feeling paranoid. I was not thinking about monsters, and although I had heard of the Michigan Dogman and the real werewolves of the Midwest, I wasn't sure they were real, and I was certainly not actually expecting to see one. But I saw more than just one. I took a deep breath and savored the earthy smell of the forest. It was a mixture of pine needles, decaying leaves, and the faint scent of wildflowers. I could also smell the rain that would be coming soon, that fresh ozone aroma. I was so happy. The day felt electrically charged. I started walking down the trail, my eyes scanning the surrounding trees and bushes. The forest was dense and green, with a variety of trees and shrubs. I could see towering pines, maples, and oaks, as well as birch trees with their silvery white bark. I also saw a variety of smaller plants including ferns, wildflowers, and mosses. There were a few small animals scurrying through the underbrush, such as squirrels and chipmunks. I also saw a few birds, such as cardinals, woodpeckers, and my favorite, which are chickadees. Everything felt in its place. Everything felt like I was walking through a storybook world. Little did I know, it was soon to turn into a very grim fairy tale. As I continued walking, the rain started to fall in earnest. It was a gentle rain, but it was enough to soak my clothes and hair. I didn't mind though. I loved the feeling of rain on my skin on a hot day, as long as I could get out of it soon enough. I stopped to rest on a fallen log under a tree that was so thick that no rain at all fell to the ground underneath it. Nature's umbrella, I thought, as I sat down and listened to the sound of the rain falling on the leaves and the birds singing right through that rainfall. I could also smell the rain-soaked earth and those pine needles all around me. It was as peaceful and invigorating an experience as I could have hoped for. I stayed on the log for a while, enjoying that moment. Then I stood up and continued on my way. I had been hiking for about an hour when I started to feel like I was being watched. I stopped and I looked around, but I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. I continued walking, unable to shake the feeling that I was being followed. A few minutes later, I heard a rustling sound in the bushes to my left. I turned around, but again I didn't see anything that I wouldn't have expected to see. I was starting to feel a little uneasy, to be honest. I had no concrete reason to feel that way. But we humans really do have a sixth sense. It's like a spidey sense that tells us when we're being watched. I don't know how it works, but I'm certain that it does work. And that was what I was feeling on that dark, warm summer day. I continued walking, but I kept my eyes peeled for any signs of danger. A few minutes later, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was a large, dark figure, standing in the trees. I stopped, and I stared at it. It was too tall to be a man. It had to be at least 8 feet tall, although it had a humanoid build. This thing was covered in thick, dark fur. It had a long, snout-like nose and pointed ears. Its eyes were a glowing amber color. I remember standing there stunned, repeating those details to myself in my head, asking myself, what has these features? I couldn't believe the answer my brain was sending back to my eyes. I was seeing a dogman. Nothing else has a dog head with a human body. The only other creature I know of with that sort of an orange eyeshine is a barred owl, right? This was not a barred owl, although it was standing up on a tree branch just like one of those birds might do. Now, I knew that dogmen were creatures of myth and legend, but I'd never really believed that they were real. Now I was seeing one with my own eyes, and I no longer had to wonder. The dogman is definitely real, and it was standing on a branch, maybe 25 or 30 feet up in the air, looking back down at me. I stood there for a moment, frozen in fear. Then, I turned as slowly as I could, and I started to calmly walk away. As I walked, I kept glancing over my shoulder at the dogman. It was still standing up there, watching me. I started to walk faster. I didn't want to run, because that would make me look like prey. But I couldn't help but hurry. As I moved along, I heard sounds of movement in the tree branches on my left. I glanced up to see that dogman following me. But then, I heard sounds from my right and from behind. Looking around quickly, I saw branches moving in every direction, and I caught glimpses of the arms or heads or feet of other dogmen. How many were there? Why were they following me? What did they intend to do to me? I wanted to scream in panic, but I thought that might drive them into a rage and cause them to swoop in and attack me from all angles. Trust me, I was never so scared or so confused in my entire life. Each of these dogmen had to be 8 feet tall or taller. Each of them had a humanoid build. They were covered in thick, dark fur. They had long, snout-like noses and pointed ears. Their eyes were all that glowing amber color. The dogmen were very agile and moved with a cat-like grace. They were also very strong. I could see the power in their muscles. I was terrified of those dogmen, but I was also fascinated by them. They were creatures of myth and legend after all, and I never thought I would actually get a chance to see one. After a few minutes, I came to a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a park ranger station. I ran to the station and burst through the door. "Help!" I shouted. "There's a dogman in the woods. In fact, there's a whole family of them." The park ranger looked up from his desk. "What's going on?" he asked. "I saw a dogman," I said, trying to simplify things and not just blurt everything out at once. I figured let him know there's one dogman so he'll go back out there with me. Let him see the others for himself. "It's in the woods behind the ranger station," I insisted to him. The park ranger stood up and grabbed his rifle. "Let's go take a look," he said. We ran out of that station and into those woods. We followed the trail that I had taken, but we didn't see any sign of the dogman. "Are you sure you saw a big creature here, sir?" the park ranger asked. "I'm sure," I said. "I saw it with my own eyes." We continued walking for a few minutes, but we still didn't see any of the dogman. "Maybe it was just a trick of the light, sir," the park ranger suggested. I wasn't so sure. I knew what I had seen. It was a dogman. In fact, there was a whole tribe of them. We eventually made it back to the ranger station. The park ranger thanked me for my time and he went back to work. I stood outside the building for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I had seen a dogman, and not just one dogman, but several of them. I knew this was a day that I would never forget. Story number 2. Dogman. On the way home from school. I had a long day at school, but at least it was finally over. As I walked home, I couldn't help but think about my mom and how sick she had been lately. The doctor said she just needed to rest and recover. But that doctor is kind of a freak that I don't trust, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. I wanted to get home fast and check on her. I decided to take a shortcut through the woods. I know to seek out nature and peaceful moments when I'm going through stressful times. In fact, that's something my mom taught me. When Dad was sick and about to pass on, she and I would meditate together and go on nature walks to remind ourselves to stay in the here and now. We needed to stay alive for her husband and my father. We would do him a disservice if we allowed ourselves to go down with him. Now that my mom was the ill one, I tried to remember all her lessons from that time. So I looked around myself, trying to appreciate where I was and what was happening there in that present moment. The trees were tall and thick, and the leaves were just starting to change color. The sun was setting, and the sky was a dark, overcast color. I was walking quickly, but I was still careful to watch my step. The path was narrow and winding, and there were roots and rocks all over the ground. I didn't want to trip and fall. I was about halfway through the woods when I heard a noise. I stopped and listened, but I couldn't hear anything else. I started walking again, but I was more cautious now, and walking lightly, quietly, alert, and remembering to use all my senses the way nature intends us to do. A few minutes later, I heard that noise again. It was a low growl, and it sounded like it was coming from the trees to my left. I stopped and turned to look, but I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. I started walking again, but I was really scared now. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. A few seconds later, I saw it. It was sitting on a tree branch, looking right at me. It was a wolfman, or maybe a dogman. I couldn't tell for sure. It was big and hairy, with large glowing amber eyes that seemed lit from within. It didn't make a sound, it just stared at me. I stood there for a moment, frozen with fear. Then I slowly started to back away. The wolfman didn't move. It just kept staring at me. That dogman or werewolf was big and hairy, bigger than me for certain, with thick fur all over its body, except for its chest and paws. Its fur was a dark brown color but had a reddish tint to it in the fading light. Its ears were pointed like a dog and stood up straight. Its nose was long and black, and its teeth were sharp and white. Its eyes were the most striking thing about it. They were a bright yellowish-orange color, and they glowed in the fading light. That wolfman creature was sitting on a tree branch about 20 or 30 feet above the ground. It was lounging back with its arms and legs crossed. It looked like it was completely comfortable. I watched the creature up there for a few seconds, and then I turned and I ran. I didn't look back. I ran all the way home, and I didn't stop running until I reached my front door. I burst through that door and I slammed it shut behind me. I leaned against the door and I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. Was it really a wolf man? Or was it just my imagination? Honestly, I just don't want to find out. I went straight to my mom's room and I checked on her. She was sleeping peacefully. I sat down on her bed and I watched her for a while, still thinking about what I'd just seen. The entire time I cared for my mother that night, it was hard not to stare out the windows. I wonder if that beast was still out there. Wondering if it had followed me home. Wondering if I would see it again. Well, so far I have not seen that dogman again, but I still can't forget it. And I will never take that shortcut through those woods ever again. Story number 3. The Dogman of Holmboe. I had been hiking in Holmboe Conifer Forest State Natural Area for a few hours when I came across them. I was walking along a narrow trail, surrounded by towering pines and hemlocks. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was warm and still. I was enjoying the peace and quiet of the forest when I heard a noise. It was a low growl, but it was coming from above me. I stopped and I looked up. There, sitting on a branch in a nearby tree, was a huge man-sized creature. It was covered in thick, dark fur, and it had big yellowish eyes. It was a dogman, or maybe a wolfman. The creature stared at me for a moment, then it turned its head and looked away. I started walking again, but I was careful to keep the creature in sight. A few minutes later, I saw another one. It was sitting on a branch in a different tree. And then I saw a third. That's right, there were 3 of them in total. All of them were big and hairy, with big amber eyes. And they were all watching me. I felt a chill run down my spine. I was getting really scared. These dogmen were all about the size of a tall professional athlete, maybe even a little bigger than that. They were covered in thick and dark fur. Their fur was longest on their backs and their legs, the shortest on their chests and their paws. Their faces were a mix of canine and human features. They had long snouts, with sharp teeth, and those big glowing eyes. The ears were pointed like a wolf's and stood up straight. Their hands and feet were large and clawed. The dogmen were all very muscular. They looked like they could easily overpower a human. The animal men all seemed very calm and relaxed to me. They didn't seem to be afraid of my presence at all. They just watched me as I walked beneath them. I don't know what their intentions were. Maybe they were just curious. Or maybe they were planning to attack me. Although I do have to say that as I kept walking, I saw they were just watching. They didn't seem to be aggressive. I was still scared, but I was also fascinated. I had never seen anything like the dogman before, that's for sure. I wanted to turn and run. Every part of me, every atom of me wanted to turn and run. But I knew that would be the worst thing I could do. If I ran, they might have instinctively chased me. So I kept walking, slowly, carefully. I kept my peripheral vision focused on those dogmen, and they kept their eyes staring directly at me. We were at a stalemate. Finally, I reached a clearing. I took a deep breath and I started to cross. The dogmen were still watching me from their trees. I made it to the other side of the clearing without incident. I took another breath and I started walking again. Looking back over my shoulder, I saw that those dogmen were still watching me even then. I kept walking, and eventually, I lost sight of them. I didn't stop walking until I had reached the trailhead, and that was where I sat down on a rock, and I caught my breath. I was safe for now, but I would never forget the Dogman of Holmbo. He's the man who is on the spot. Please all help me welcome back Scott. Yes, that's right, Scott Halisic has rejoined our channel memberships, which means he gets to see our recent secret members-only episodes, which feature elements that YouTube does not allow us to talk about on this channel. If you'd also like to see these secret shows, then you should listen to what this next guy has to say. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.